Good evening, dear travelers, and welcome back to Snug as a Bug. Tonight, we delve into the heart of the medieval world, a time of chivalry, mystery, and ancient magic. Let yourself sink deeply into your bed, releasing the burdens of the day with a gentle breath in and out. You are safe, warm, and ready to journey through the mists of time. Allow yourself to be enveloped by a sense of calm and curiosity as we embark on this enchanting adventure. Tonight's collection of tales will transport you to realms both familiar and fantastical. We begin with The Knight and the Dragon, a tale of bravery and compassion, where a knight's courage is tested by the fiery trials of a legendary beast. Next, we venture to the Enchanted Castle of Avalon, where secrets of ancient power and destiny lie hidden beyond a shimmering lake. Then, you'll follow the Alchemist's Apprentice as they uncover the mysteries of forbidden relics and elemental forces. Finally, we unravel the secret of the Monastery, a story of shadows, faith, and the battle to restore light in a time of darkness. Let the soft whispers of these medieval legends carry you to a place of peace, where the wonders of the past unfold like a gentle dream. As the comforting sounds of crackling hearths, rustling leaves, and distant bells weave through the night, you'll find yourself drifting effortlessly into deep and restful sleep. Before we embark on this magical journey, let's take a moment to prepare our minds and bodies for relaxation. Close your eyes, letting them grow heavy, and feel the bed beneath you, cradling and supporting you. Take a long, deep inhale, drawing in the serenity of this moment, and exhale slowly, releasing any tension still lingering in your body. With each breath, feel yourself becoming lighter as the worries of the day melt away. Picture yourself now in a quiet medieval village, the twilight sky casting a golden glow over cobblestone streets and ivy-clad cottages. The faint sound of a lute drifts from an inn, and the gentle clink of a blacksmith's hammer echoes from afar. The air is crisp and clean, carrying the scent of wood smoke and fresh bread. You feel at ease, as though you've stepped into a storybook world where anything is possible. As you walk, a path unfolds before you, winding through ancient forests, past towering castles, and into the heart of legends waiting to be told. With each step, feel yourself sinking deeper into relaxation, deeper into stillness. Now let go, dear wanderer. Allow these tales of valor, magic, and mystery to guide you gently into the night as you drift into a deep and peaceful sleep. The Knight and the Dragon. Chapter 1. The village of Greystone was alive with the bustle of harvest season. Women wove golden sheaves of wheat into bundles, children chased chickens that had wandered too far from their pens, and men secured the year's crop in their barns. The air carried the sweet scent of ripe apples and wood smoke, a comforting reminder that the hearth fires of home burned strong. Yet beneath this surface of rural simplicity, a sense of unease lingered. For weeks now, strange happenings had troubled the village. Shepherds would awaken to find their flocks scattered, their sheep missing without a trace. Fields that had once been lush and green were now burnt to brittle stalks, the soil beneath turned ashen. The villagers whispered of Erindor, the ancient dragon said to sleep beneath the Dragonspire Mountains. They spoke of its fiery breath and golden eyes, of how its slumber, once thought eternal, might now be disturbed. In the center of Greystone, a meeting had gathered in the hall. The elder, Maren, sat at the head of the long oak table, her gnarled hands clasped before her. She had seen 80 summers, her hair white as frost, her voice still carrying the authority of a lifetime. "The signs are clear," she said. her voice cutting through the murmurs. "Erindor has awakened. If it is not stopped, our home will be consumed." The villagers exchanged frightened glances. No one dared speak until Cedric rose from his seat. He was not the tallest man in the room, nor the most imposing, but there was a quiet strength about him. His armor, polished to a mirror shine, reflected the flickering torchlight, and his sword hung at his hip like a silent promise. "I will go," he said, his voice steady. "I will confront the dragon." The hall fell silent. Then a murmur began, growing into applause. Even Maren nodded approvingly, though her face remained grave. "You are brave, Sir Cedric," she said, "but bravery alone will not save you." That evening, as the village prepared a feast to send him off, Cedric walked to the riverbank where he had spent so many boyhood hours dreaming of knighthood. The water shimmered in the moonlight, its surface broken by ripples that carried the scent of earth and moss. He knelt, dipping his hands into the cool water, and prayed. "Grant me the strength to protect my people," he whispered, "and the wisdom to see the path ahead." Chapter 2. At dawn, Cedric mounted his horse, Ashen, and began his journey. The villagers lined the cobbled road, waving handkerchiefs and calling blessings. A child ran up, pressing a small wooden carving of a dragon into his hand. "For luck," the boy said, his eyes wide with admiration. Cedric tucked the token into his saddlebag and set off, the village fading into the distance. The road to Dragonspire began as a gentle incline through rolling hills, the kind that lulled travellers into a false sense of ease. Cedric let Ashen trot at her own pace, his eyes scanning the horizon. By midday, he reached the edge of the Darkwood, a forest that marked the halfway point of his journey. The trees here were ancient, their gnarled branches reaching skyward like skeletal fingers. The air grew cooler and the sunlight dimmed, filtered through a dense canopy of leaves. As he ventured deeper, the forest seemed alive. Leaves rustled where there was no wind, and shadows shifted in ways they shouldn't. Ashen whinnied nervously, her ears flicking back and forth. "Easy, girl," Cedric murmured, stroking her neck. It was then he saw the hermit. The man seemed to materialize from the shadows, his robes blending seamlessly with the underbrush. He leaned on a twisted staff, his face hidden beneath a hood. "Knight!" the hermit rasped, his voice barely louder than the whispering leaves. "You tread a perilous path." Cedric dismounted, keeping his hand on his sword. "Who are you?" he asked. "And how do you know of my quest?" The hermit chuckled, a dry, rattling sound. "The forest knows many things," he said, "and it speaks to those who listen. You seek Erindor, the great worm of Dragonspire." Cedric hesitated, then nodded. "I must end its terror." The hermit studied him for a long moment, his gaze piercing despite the shadows. "Strength alone will not prevail against such a foe," he said, reaching into his robes. He withdrew a small vial, its contents shimmering like liquid starlight. "Drink this when the moment is dire. It will awaken the fire within you." Before Cedric could ask what he meant, the hermit turned and disappeared into the trees, leaving behind only the faint scent of pine and damp earth. Chapter 3. The path to Dragonspire grew steeper and more treacherous. Cedric guided Ashen carefully over loose rocks and narrow ledges, the wind howling around them. By the time he reached the summit, the sun was setting, casting the mountains in shades of crimson and gold. The entrance to Erindor's lair was a gaping maw in the mountainside, veined with glowing streams of molten rock. Heat radiated from the cavern, and the ground trembled faintly beneath Cedric's boots. He left Ashen tethered to a sturdy tree and stepped inside. The air was thick with smoke and sulphur, stinging his eyes and throat. The walls of the cavern glistened with moisture, the light from the molten rock casting eerie shadows. Cedric moved cautiously, his sword drawn, his senses heightened. Then he saw it. Erindor lay coiled in the heart of the cavern, its massive body gleaming like molten gold. Its eyes, twin orbs of fire, snapped open, and its wings unfurled, filling the cavern with their immense span. The dragon's roar shook the very earth, a sound that was both terrifying and majestic. "Who dares disturb my slumber?" Erindor demanded, its voice a rumble of thunder. Cedric stepped forward, his heart pounding. "I am Sir Cedric of Greystone," he said. "I have come to end your reign of terror." Erindor laughed, a sound like crackling flames. "You, a mortal? You are but a flicker against the inferno of time." Chapter 4. The battle that followed was a symphony of fire and steel. Erindor's breath lit up the cavern, forcing Cedric to dive and roll to avoid the searing heat. He struck back with precision, his blade finding gaps in the dragon's scales. The clang of metal against scale echoed like 1,000 bells. Erindor lashed out with its tail, sending Cedric sprawling. The knight struggled to his feet, blood trickling from a cut above his eye. His strength was waning, and he knew he could not outlast the dragon. Desperate, Cedric reached for the vial the hermit had given him. He drank, the liquid filling him with warmth and light. Strength surged through his limbs and his mind became clear. He raised his sword, now glowing with an otherworldly light, and struck. Erindor recoiled, its roar a mix of pain and anger. "You are no ordinary knight," the dragon growled, retreating slightly. "What power is this?" Chapter 5. Cedric paused, his sword still raised. "Erindor," he said, his voice steady, "I do not wish to destroy you. Let us make a pact. Guard my people, and I will ensure your slumber is not disturbed again." The dragon studied him for a long moment, its fiery gaze softening. "You have proven yourself worthy, mortal," Erindor said. "I accept." With a roar, the dragon took to the skies, disappearing into the night. Cedric returned to Greystone, hailed as a hero, though he carried no trophy. His tale was one of courage, wisdom, and compassion. Chapter 6. The village of Greystone welcomed Cedric back with joyous celebration, though his arrival was not marked by the spoils of war or the triumph of conquest. Instead, he brought a story of understanding, a tale that resonated deeply with those who gathered to hear it. Marin, the elder, listened intently as Cedric recounted his encounter with Erindor. When he finished, she rose slowly, her eyes glistening with tears. "You have done more than protect us, Sir Cedric," she said. "You have forged a bond that ensures peace for generations." The villagers honored Cedric with feasts and songs, but the knight remained humble. He visited the families who had lost livestock and the farmers whose fields had been scorched, offering his strength to rebuild what had been damaged. His actions inspired others, and soon the entire village joined together to restore their home. As the years passed, the legend of Cedric and Erindor grew. Travelers came from distant lands to see the village that had been spared the wrath of a dragon. Children played games inspired by the knight's courage, and the carving of the dragon gifted to Cedric on his journey became a cherished symbol of unity, displayed proudly in the village square. Erindor, true to its word, kept its distance, but did not vanish completely. On moonlit nights, the villagers claimed they could see the great dragon soaring over the mountains, its golden scales glinting in the starlight. Far from a figure of fear, Erindor became a guardian in the villagers' eyes, a reminder of the harmony that could exist between the mortal and the mythical. Cedric himself never sought wealth or titles. Instead, he chose to remain in Greystone, teaching the next generation the values of courage, wisdom, and compassion. He passed on the story of his journey not as a tale of triumph, but as a lesson in finding strength in peace. In time, Cedric grew old, his once polished armor dulled by years of service to his people. On the night he passed, a great shadow swept over the village, and those who looked to the sky swore they saw Erindor flying low, its fiery eyes filled with sorrow. Cedric was buried beneath the ancient oak by the riverbank, the place where he had prayed for guidance so many years ago. The villagers planted wildflowers around his grave, and the dragon carving was placed at its base, a silent guardian watching over the knight who had bridged the divide between man and dragon. And so the story of the knight and the dragon became the heart of Greystone's legacy, a testament to the power of understanding and the enduring strength of peace. The Enchanted Castle of Avalon. Chapter 1. The fire crackled low in the hearth, casting warm shadows on the timbered walls of Cedric's small home. Outside, the village of Greystone lay in peaceful slumber after a night of celebration. Cedric sat alone by the fire, a mug of spiced ale untouched in his hands. Though his body still bore the aches of his battle with the dragon Erindor, his heart felt restless, as if another journey awaited. It was then he heard it, a voice, soft and melodic, carried on the cool night breeze that slipped through his open window. "Come, brave knight. Your journey is not yet complete. Seek the Enchanted Castle of Avalon, where the veil between realms grows thin and destiny awaits." Cedric shot upright, his pulse quickening. The voice was undeniably otherworldly. He moved to the window and peered into the moonlit night. The fields shimmered in silver light, but no figure emerged from the shadows. The voice, however, lingered in his mind, pulling at his resolve. The next morning, Cedric sought Elder Marin. The wise woman listened as he recounted the strange summons. A flicker of understanding lit her eyes. "Avalon," she murmured, her fingers tracing the worn wood of her staff. "It is a realm of legend, said to hold great power and wisdom, but reaching it will not be easy. Avalon's trials test more than your strength, they test your heart." Marin opened an ancient tome and produced a faded map, its edges frayed and ink smudged with time. It marked a path through dense forests, across a shimmering river, and to a lake hidden within perpetual mists. "Take this," she said. "Trust your instincts, Cedric. Avalon will reveal itself to the worthy." Cedric studied the map, his resolve hardening. "I will find Avalon," he vowed. Chapter 2. At dawn, Cedric mounted his horse, Ashen, and set off. The cool air carried the scent of autumn, and the rising sun bathed the hills in golden light. By midday, he reached the edge of the Forest of Echoes. The forest loomed before him, its ancient trees draped in moss, and its paths shrouded in shadows. As he ventured deeper, a strange stillness enveloped him. The air seemed to hum with whispers, snatches of words, melodies, and faint laughter. Cedric tightened his grip on the hilt of his sword. "Avalon calls to you, knight." A low, mournful voice murmured from the shadows. Cedric halted and called out, "Who speaks?" A figure emerged from the trees, a woman cloaked in emerald, her auburn hair glinting in the dappled sunlight. Her eyes shimmered like moonlight on water. "I am Elenwyn, guardian of the Forest of Echoes," she said. "To pass, you must face the echoes of your soul." "What must I do?" Cedric asked. Elenwyn gestured to the forest around them. "The whispers you hear are your fears and regrets. Confront them, and the forest will yield to you." Cedric closed his eyes, letting the whispers surround him. He heard his doubts, his failures, and the weight of lives he could not save. Each voice sought to undermine his resolve, yet he stood firm, acknowledging the truths they carried without succumbing to despair. When he opened his eyes, the forest seemed brighter. Elenwyn smiled. "You are stronger than most who tread this path. Follow the light, and Avalon will await." A soft glow appeared in the distance, guiding Cedric out of the forest. To 3. The forest gave way to a wide river that sparkled like liquid glass, its surface reflecting the sky in perfect clarity. A lone ferryman waited by the shore, his hooded figure silent. "Do you seek Avalon?" the ferryman asked. "I do," Cedric replied. The ferryman motioned for him to board. As the boat glided across the water, Cedric noticed the river's surface shift and shimmer, revealing scenes from his past. He saw himself as a boy, wielding a wooden sword, his parents' faces proud, yet anxious as he left for knighthood. He saw Erendor's fiery breath, and the moment he had offered the dragon Halti. "Why do I see these things?" Cedric asked. "The river of time reflects the moments that define you," the ferryman said. "Do not linger too long, or you may lose sight of your journey." Cedric forced himself to look ahead. As the boat neared the opposite shore, the ferryman raised his hand. "Your trials are far from over. Go with courage." Chapter 4. Beyond the river lay the lake, its surface veiled in thick, swirling mist. Cedric stepped to the edge, the map offering no further guidance. The air felt charged with unseen energy, and a sense of foreboding settled over him. The mist shifted, and apparitions appeared, ghostly figures of those he had loved and lost. His mother's kind face appeared first, her voice heavy with sorrow. "Turn back, my son. This path will lead only to ruin." Cedric's heart ached, but he stood firm. "You are not real," he said softly. "I carry your memory with me, but I will not falter." The apparitions dissolved, and the mist parted, revealing a bridge of light stretching across the lake. Cedric stepped onto it, his resolve unshaken. Chapter 5. The bridge led to an island where the Enchanted Castle of Avalon rose majestically, its silver spires piercing the clouds. Its gates stood open, glowing with an ethereal light. Cedric crossed the threshold, his steps echoing in the vast hall. At the center of the chamber stood a pedestal, upon which rested a radiant orb. As Cedric approached, a voice filled the hall, a woman's voice, serene and commanding. "Knight of Greystone, you have passed the trials and reached Avalon. What do you seek?" Cedric knelt. "I seek wisdom and strength to protect my people and bring peace to the land." The orb pulsed with light, and a figure appeared, a woman cloaked in white, her eyes filled with ancient knowledge. "Your heart is pure, and your purpose noble. Take the power of Avalon, but wield it with care." Cedric reached for the orb. As his fingers touched it, warmth and light surged through him. Visions of the past, present, and future flooded his mind, along with an unshakable connection to the land and its people. When the light faded, the woman's voice echoed once more. "Your journey does not end here, Cedric. Avalon will call upon you again." Chapter 6. The castle dissolved into mist, and Cedric found himself standing at the lake's edge. The sun shone brightly overhead, and the air was filled with the songs of birds. He mounted Ashen, his heart alight with purpose. Returning to Greystone, Cedric was hailed as a hero, but he sought no accolades. Instead, he devoted his life to using Avalon's wisdom to heal rifts, strengthen alliances, and guide his people to a future of harmony. Though years passed, the legend of Cedric and the Enchanted Castle of Avalon endured, a tale of courage, compassion, and the enduring strength of those who choose to walk the path of light. The Alchemist's Apprentice. Chapter 1. It had been months since Cedric's journey to Avalon, yet the memories of its glowing spires and mysterious guardians lingered like a waking dream. The night had returned to Greystone, but peace was fleeting. Strange occurrences had begun to disrupt the village once more: unseasonal storms, livestock falling ill, and crops withering despite fertile soil. Late one evening, as the moon hung low and luminous, Cedric sat in his study, poring over maps and notes he'd collected on his travels. The fire crackled warmly beside him, casting flickering shadows on the walls. A sharp knock at the door startled him from his thoughts. Standing on the threshold was a young messenger, his face pale and rain-soaked. He handed Cedric a sealed parchment. "This arrived for you, Sir Cedric." The sender did not give their name, only said it was urgent. Cedric thanked the boy, handed him a coin, and closed the door. Breaking the wax seal, he unrolled the letter. The handwriting was elegant, yet hurried. "Knight of Greystone. The balance of nature falters, and your land is but the first to feel its effects. I believe I know the cause, but I require your aid. Travel to the town of Eldwin, where the River Argent forks. You will find me in the tower that overlooks the square. Speak of this letter to no one. A friend." The signature was unfamiliar, yet Cedric felt a pull toward the letter's cryptic message. He knew Eldwin, a bustling town known for its scholars and craftsmen. If there were answers to be found, he would uncover them. Chapter 2. The journey to Eldwin took 2 days. Cedric rode through misty meadows and across ancient stone bridges that spanned rivers, swollen with recent rains. By the time he reached the town, its cobbled streets were slick with water, and lanterns flickered in the windows of shops and inns. The tower mentioned in the letter loomed over the square, its silhouette stark against the twilight sky. It was an imposing structure, built of dark stone and crowned with iron spires. Cedric approached its heavy oak door and knocked. The door creaked open on its own, revealing a dimly lit interior. "Enter, Sir Cedric," a voice called from above. It was smooth and measured, neither hostile nor entirely welcoming. Cedric climbed the spiral staircase, his boots echoing on the stone steps. At the top, he found a circular chamber filled with shelves of books, bubbling cauldrons, and strange devices of brass and glass. A man stood at the far side of the room, his back turned as he adjusted the flame beneath a boiling vial. The man turned, revealing a face marked by years of study and weariness. His piercing grey eyes seemed to see through Cedric. "I am Elias, an alchemist," he said, "and I suspect the imbalance plaguing your land is no natural phenomenon." Cedric crossed his arms. "Then what is it?" Elias gestured to a table covered in parchments and strange objects, a crystal glowing faintly, a shard of blackened stone, and a small brass compass. The disturbance stems from an artifact known as the Heart of Ethera. It is an object of immense power, created centuries ago by a reckless alchemist who sought to harness the energy of the natural world. The artifact was believed lost, but I have reason to believe it has resurfaced. Cedric frowned. "If it's as dangerous as you say, why seek it out?" "Because left unchecked, its power will unravel the balance of the elements," Elias said. "Floods, droughts, and storms will escalate, and life will falter. We must retrieve it and seal its power." Chapter 3. The next morning, Elias handed Cedric a map marked with their destination. A ruined fortress deep in the Wilderwood, an ancient forest said to be enchanted. The Heart of Ethera, he explained, was likely hidden in the fortress's central vault, but reaching it would require overcoming elemental trials left by its creator. They set out at dawn with Elias riding a sturdy mule laden with supplies. The journey was arduous, the path through the Wilderwood narrow and overgrown. As they ventured deeper, the air seemed to hum with energy, and the forest grew eerily quiet. At last, they reached the fortress. It stood in a clearing, its once mighty walls now crumbled and overgrown with ivy. The entrance was marked by a pair of weathered stone statues, their eyes glowing faintly as Cedric and Elias approached. Inside, the air was cool and damp. A grand hall stretched before them, its floor inscribed with intricate runes. At the far end stood a massive door, its surface carved with symbols representing fire, water, air, and earth. "This is the first trial," Elias said, studying the door. "We must align the elements to proceed." The puzzle required patience and insight. With Elias's knowledge and Cedric's quick thinking, they turned levers, shifted stones, and solved riddles until the symbols aligned. The door groaned open, revealing a narrow passage beyond. Each trial tested their resolve. A room filled with swirling flames forced Cedric to traverse a treacherous path, his armor growing unbearably hot. A chamber of rushing water nearly swept them away, but Elias used an elixir to calm the currents. A howling wind battered them in another room, and shifting stone platforms tested Cedric's agility. At last they reached the vault. Chapter 4. The vault was a circular chamber bathed in an otherworldly glow. At its center floated the Heart of Ethera, a crystalline orb pulsing with light that shifted between hues of gold, blue, green, and red. The air crackled with energy, making the hairs on Cedric's arms stand on end. Elias approached cautiously. "It's beautiful," he murmured, "and deadly." As he reached out to contain the artifact within a specially crafted box, the chamber trembled. A voice, deep and resonant, filled the air. "Who dares disturb my creation?" A figure materialized before them, spectral and menacing. It was the spirit of the alchemist who had forged the heart, his face twisted with anger. "You seek to seal my masterpiece! You are fools!" The spirit summoned elemental forces to defend the artifact. Flames roared, water surged, and the ground shook. Cedric fought valiantly, using his strength and reflexes to shield Elias, while the alchemist worked to secure the heart. At last, Elias succeeded. The artifact's light dimmed as it was sealed within the box, and the spirit let out a howl of rage before dissipating. Chapter 5. The journey back to Eldwyn was marked by relief and reflection. The forest seemed less foreboding, and the storms that had plagued the land began to subside. Back in the tower, Elias placed the sealed heart in a vault, reinforced with runes and wards. "Its power is contained, for now," he said, "but it must never fall into the wrong hands." Cedric nodded, knowing the responsibility they now shared. What happens if someone tries to use it again? Elias's expression was grave. "Then we must be ready." As Cedric rode back to Greystone, he felt a deep sense of fulfillment. Though the trials had been grueling, they had strengthened his resolve and deepened his understanding of the world's balance. The Secret of the Monastery. Chapter 1. The rain fell in a gentle, rhythmic patter on the cobblestone streets of Greystone as Cedric sharpened his sword in the warmth of his hearth. The flickering firelight danced across the polished blade, each stroke of the whetstone accompanied by the soft hum of thought. It had been weeks since his return from the Wilderwood, where he and the alchemist Elias had sealed the heart of Ethera, and Cedric was beginning to feel the weight of solitude. His reverie was interrupted by a sharp knock at the door. Rising swiftly, Cedric opened it to find a young woman, cloaked and soaked from the rain. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with desperation. "Sir Cedric," she gasped, clutching a bundle close to her chest. "You are my last hope." He ushered her inside, offering her a warm blanket and a seat by the fire. The woman introduced herself as Lyanna, a pilgrim from the distant hills near Stornvale. Her voice trembled as she spoke. "My brother Thomas is a monk at the Monastery of Dawn. He recently sent me a letter begging for my help, but when I arrived, I found the gates barred and the grounds eerily silent. The villagers nearby whispered of strange happenings, monks disappearing, shadows moving where no light exists, and whispers in the night." Cedric leaned forward, his brow furrowing. "And your brother?" "I fear he is in grave danger," she said, her voice breaking. "Please, Sir Cedric, will you help me uncover the truth?" Cedric didn't hesitate. "I will help you," he said, his voice resolute. "Prepare yourself. We leave at dawn." Chapter 2. The journey to Stornvale was fraught with unease. The hills grew steeper and more rugged as they travelled, and the weather seemed to mirror the tension in the air. Storm clouds rolled overhead, their edges tinged with a strange green hue. As they rode, Lyanna shared more about the monastery. The Monastery of Dawn was once a sanctuary for those seeking peace and enlightenment. The monks tended to ancient scrolls, cultivated rare herbs, and welcomed travellers with open arms. But in recent months, the villagers began to notice changes. The bells no longer tolled at sunrise, and the once lush gardens withered. Some say the monks have turned to forbidden practices, but others whisper of an ancient curse. Cedric listened intently, his hand resting on the hilt of his sword. He could sense the weight of something unnatural, something waiting. As they reached the village at the base of the hill where the monastery stood, Cedric decided to gather information. The villagers were wary, their eyes darting toward the mist-shrouded monastery. An elderly man, hunched and leaning on a cane, warned Cedric, "If you value your life, stay away. That place is no longer holy, it is cursed." Ignoring the warnings, Cedric and Lyanna pressed on, ascending the winding path that led to the monastery gates. Chapter 3. The Monastery of Dawn loomed before them, its stone walls worn by centuries of wind and rain. The gates, once welcoming, now hung ajar, creaking softly in the wind. Cedric pushed them open, his armor glinting faintly in the waning light. Inside, the courtyard was eerily quiet. The fountain at its center, once a symbol of purity, was dry and cracked. The statues of saints lining the walls seemed to watch them, their faces shadowed and solemn. Cedric drew his sword, the weight of his instincts pressing heavily upon him. "Stay close," he said to Lyanna. They entered the main hall, where the air was thick with the scent of decay. Rows of wooden pews lay in disarray, and the grand altar at the far end was shrouded in shadow. As they stepped closer, Cedric noticed strange markings etched into the stone floor, symbols that pulsed faintly, as if alive. A soft sound broke the silence, a whisper, faint and indistinct. Lyanna froze, clutching Cedric's arm. "Did you hear that?" she whispered. Cedric nodded, his eyes scanning the hall. "Stay here," he said, moving toward the source of the sound. He found a monk slumped against the wall, his robes torn and his face pale. The man's eyes fluttered open, and he grasped Cedric's arm with surprising strength. "The darkness, it comes from below," he rasped. "The crypt, the seal has been broken." Before Cedric could ask more, the monk fell silent, his hand going limp. Chapter 4. Cedric and Lyanna found the entrance to the crypt in a side chamber. A heavy iron door, its surface marked with the same pulsing symbols, barred their way. With great effort, Cedric forced it open, revealing a spiral staircase that descended into darkness. The air grew colder as they descended, and the faint sound of chanting echoed from below. The walls of the crypt were lined with ancient stone coffins, their lids carved with the likenesses of long-dead monks. The symbols grew brighter, their light casting eerie shadows. At the bottom of the stairs they found a large chamber. In its center stood a massive stone slab, inscribed with runes that glowed an ominous red. Around it, several monks knelt in a circle, their chanting growing louder as Cedric and Lyanna approached. "What are they doing?" Lyanna whispered, her voice trembling. "They're summoning something," Cedric said grimly. He stepped forward, his voice ringing out. "Stop this at once!" The monks turned, their faces gaunt and hollow-eyed. One of them, wearing a tattered robe adorned with a strange sigil, rose to his feet. "You do not understand," he said. "We are not summoning. It has already been awakened. We are trying to contain it." As he spoke, the ground shook, and a deafening roar filled the chamber. The stone slab cracked, and a shadowy figure began to emerge, a being of smoke and fire, its eyes burning like coals. Chapter 5. The creature rose to its full height, its form shifting and writhing like a living storm. Cedric stepped forward, sword in hand, as the monks scrambled to reinforce their circle. "It is a shade!" the lead monk shouted. "A fragment of an ancient evil. We cannot let it escape." Cedric charged, his sword slicing through the creature's form. It let out a roar of rage, its fiery tendrils lashing out. Each strike seemed to disperse the creature momentarily, but it reformed just as quickly. Elias had once told him that shadows were not fought with strength alone, but with light. Cedric turned to the lead monk. "The runes! What do they mean?" "They are seals," the monk said, "but they must be activated." Liana, clutching a fallen torch, lit it and began moving around the chamber, igniting braziers at each corner. As the flames grew, the creature began to shrink, its movements more frantic. Cedric fought relentlessly, buying time for the monks and Liana to complete the ritual. When the final brazier was lit, the runes on the floor flared brightly, and the creature let out a final piercing scream before collapsing into nothingness. Chapter 6. The chamber fell silent, the oppressive darkness replaced by a warm glow. The monks, though weary, began to chant a hymn of thanks, their voices filling the crypt with peace. The lead monk approached Cedric and Liana, his expression one of gratitude. "You have saved us," he said. "The seal is restored, but the darkness will always seek to return. We must remain vigilant." As Cedric and Liana emerged from the crypt, the first rays of dawn broke over the horizon, bathing the monastery in golden light. The bells, silent for so long, began to toll once more, a symbol of hope restored. Cedric turned to Liana. "Your brother would be proud," he said. "And I am grateful to you," she replied. As they made their way back to Greystone, Cedric felt a sense of fulfillment. Though the journey had tested him, it had also strengthened his resolve to protect the balance between light and darkness. Far away on the horizon, the faint glow of Avalon flickered once more, a reminder that his destiny was far from complete.